The neighbors had been complaining for months. Something smelled terrible coming from the house on Summerdale Avenue in Des Plaines, Illinois. The man who lived there, a friendly contractor, always had an excuse. "It's the sewage," he'd say with a smile. "The pipes are old. I'll get it fixed soon." But the smell got worse and worse. And in December 1978, when police finally stepped inside that ordinary-looking house, they discovered something that would shock the entire world. This is the story of a man who fooled everyone. A man who shook hands with the First Lady. A man who dressed as a clown to entertain sick children in hospitals. A man who threw neighborhood parties and barbecues. A man who seemed like the perfect neighbor, the perfect citizen, the perfect friend. But underneath the smiles and the colorful clown makeup was something darker than anyone could imagine. If you want to hear the full story of one of America's most terrifying criminals, hit that subscribe button right now. Because this story is about to get much, much darker. It started with a phone call. On December 11th, 1978, 15-year-old Robert Pius told his mother he'd be right back. He worked at a local pharmacy, and a contractor had come in saying he might have a job for the boy. Good money, too. Robert was excited. He just needed to step outside for a quick chat. "I'll be back in a few minutes, Mom," he said. "Then we can go celebrate your birthday." His mother waited. 5 minutes passed. Then 10. Then 20. Robert never came back. The contractor's name was John Wayne Gacy. He was 36 years old, friendly, and successful. He owned a construction company called PDM Contractors. People in the neighborhood liked him. He worked hard. He threw big parties at his house. He even volunteered as Pogo the Clown, entertaining children at hospitals and charity events. When police went to talk to Gacy about the missing boy, he seemed helpful, cooperative. "Sure, I talked to the kid," he said, "but I don't know where he went after that." He invited the officers inside his home. Everything looked normal, clean, organized, except for that smell. The police officers wrinkled their noses. What was that odor? "Sewage problem," Gacy explained with a casual wave of his hand. "The moisture under the house is causing some issues with the pipes. I've had this problem before." The officers took notes. They thanked him for his time. But something didn't feel right. As they dug deeper into Gacy's background, they found something troubling. Years earlier, in Iowa, Gacy had been convicted of sexually assaulting a teenage boy. He'd served time in prison. This changed everything. For the next week, police watched Gacy constantly. They followed him everywhere. The pressure was deliberate. Maybe he'd slip up. Maybe he'd lead them to Robert Pius. Gacy didn't like being followed. He got angry. But he also did something strange. He invited the officers into his home again and again, offering them drinks, showing them around. It was as if he was playing a game, daring them to find something wrong. One officer noticed the smell was strongest near the crawl space entrance. But they couldn't search without a warrant. Not yet. On December 13th, just 2 days after Robert disappeared, police got that search warrant. They were ready to find out what was really causing that terrible smell. When investigators entered Gacy's home, they split into teams. The team that went down to the crawl space made a discovery that stopped them cold. In the beam of their flashlights, they saw disturbed earth. Mounds of dirt that looked like they'd been dug up and filled back in. The smell down there was overwhelming, suffocating. They started to dig carefully. Within hours, they found human remains. Then more and more. They found 26 bodies buried in the crawl space. 3 more buried elsewhere on the property. The victims ranged from 14 to 21 years old. Young men and teenage boys who'd been reported missing, who had worked for Gacy, who had simply vanished. But they didn't find Robert Pius under that house. While investigators were digging, police arrested John Wayne Gacy. At first, he denied everything. But as the evidence piled up, his story began to change. Finally, in the interrogation room, Gacy started to talk. And what he revealed was absolutely chilling. He admitted to killing 33 young men and boys between 1972 and 1978. He described how he'd lure them to his home with promises of work. How he'd trick them with his rope trick, showing them a magic trick before attacking them. He spoke calmly, as if he were describing a normal day. Most horrifying of all, he explained what happened when he ran out of room in his crawl space. The later victims, including Robert Pius, had been thrown into the Des Plaines River. The river was searched, and Robert's body was eventually recovered, bringing some closure to his family, but adding to their unbearable grief. Gacy tried to claim he had multiple personalities, that Jack was the one who committed the murders. But investigators didn't buy it. The murders were too organized, too planned, too deliberate. How did this happen? How did a man who dressed as a clown and entertained children become one of America's most prolific serial killers? John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago in 1942. His childhood wasn't easy. His father was an alcoholic who often beat him and called him weak and stupid. Young John desperately wanted his father's approval, but never seemed to get it. He tried so hard to be successful and well-liked. As an adult, John Wayne Gacy managed restaurants, started his own construction business, and joined community organizations. He became a Democratic Party precinct captain, even meeting First Lady Rosalind Carter at a charity event. They even took a photo together. He dressed as Pogo the Clown for children's parties and hospital visits. To everyone, he seemed like a pillar of the community, helpful, hardworking, and generous. But there were always signs that something was deeply wrong. His first wife divorced him after he was convicted of sexually assaulting a teenage employee. He served 18 months in prison, then moved back to Chicago and remarried. That marriage also fell apart. His second wife later said she noticed strange smells in the house and saw Gacy bringing young men home late at night. When she questioned him, he'd get angry. The clown costume was particularly disturbing to investigators. Here was a man who used an image of fun and innocence, something meant to make children laugh, while hiding unimaginable darkness. It created a mask of normalcy that let him move through society undetected for years. What kind of person could fool so many people for so long? Drop a comment below with your thoughts. And if you find this story as shocking as we do, make sure you're subscribed, because the second half of this documentary reveals what happened in the courtroom and the final moments of John Wayne Gacy's life. As investigators continued their work, they built an overwhelming case. They found jewelry and identification cards from victims hidden in his house. They matched dental records to the bodies found in the crawl space. They interviewed dozens of witnesses, young men who'd escaped from his house, employees who'd noticed strange behavior, neighbors who'd seen suspicious things. One survivor described being picked up by Gacy under the pretense of a construction job. Gacy had shown him a rope trick, then quickly looped it around his neck. The young man fought back desperately and managed to escape, running into the street in terror. But when he reported it to the police at the time, nothing was done. If his report had been properly investigated, lives might have been saved. The pattern became clear. Gacy targeted vulnerable young men, runaways, teenagers looking for work, boys who might not be immediately reported missing. He exploited their trust, their need for money, their hope for a better future. He kept them under his house, literally beneath where he walked every day, where he entertained guests, where he lived his seemingly normal life. This raises a haunting question. How did Gacy get away with it for so long? There were so many warning signs. In 1975, a young man told police Gacy had kidnapped and assaulted him. Gacy claimed it was consensual, and the charges were dropped. Another young man reported being attacked in 1977. Again, no serious action was taken. Several young men who worked for Gacy's company had been reported missing over the years. Their families begged police to investigate, but no one connected the cases. No one noticed the one thing these missing boys had in common: John Wayne Gacy. The disappearance of Robert Piest was different. His parents refused to give up. His mother knew exactly where he'd gone and who he'd been talking to. She pushed investigators to focus on Gacy. Her persistence finally broke the case open. But it came too late for 33 young victims. Too late for families who'd spent years wondering what happened to their sons. The house on Somerdale Avenue became a crime scene that shocked even experienced detectives. After all the bodies were removed and all the evidence was collected, the house was demolished. People couldn't bear to look at it anymore. The property was cleared, as if erasing the building could erase what happened there. But the memories, the trauma, and the questions remained. How many others like Gacy might be out there right now, hiding behind friendly faces? How do we spot the signs before it's too late? These questions would become even more urgent as Gacy went to trial, faced his victims' families, and sat on death row for 14 years. The story of what happened in the courtroom, the shocking things Gacy said in interviews, his last meal, and his final words would reveal even more about the man behind America's most horrifying crimes. Stay tuned for the conclusion. February 1980, just 2 months after John Wayne Gacy's arrest, the trial began in Chicago. The courtroom was a tense scene. Families of the victims sat in the front rows, their faces etched with grief, hoping for justice. Reporters packed every seat, and outside, crowds gathered, hungry for updates. Gacy himself sat at the defense table in a suit and tie, looking more like a businessman than the monster he was. His lawyers knew they couldn't deny the murders. The evidence was just too overwhelming. So, they went for a different strategy, not guilty by reason of insanity. They argued that no sane person could commit such horrific acts. But the prosecution painted a very different picture. They described a man who was organized, careful, and calculating. They argued that Gacy knew exactly what he was doing. He just didn't care. For 6 long weeks, the jury listened to testimony that was almost too horrible to comprehend. Medical examiners described the victim's remains. Police recounted the chilling search of the crawl space, and survivors shared their harrowing tales of escaping Gacy's house of horrors. The defense brought in psychiatrists who spoke of Gacy's troubled childhood and psychological issues, insisting he must be insane. The prosecution's experts countered this, pointing out Gacy's successful business, his meticulous planning of the murders, and his ability to lie convincingly to the police for years. The most damning evidence, however, came from Gacy himself. His detailed confessions, where he explained his methods and how he avoided capture, showed a mind that was anything but broken. On March 13, 1980, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with their verdict. Guilty. Guilty on 33 counts of murder. The courtroom erupted, but it wasn't over. Next came the penalty phase, life in prison or the death penalty. The prosecution argued for death, reminding the jury of the young lives stolen so cruelly. The defense pleaded for life. The jury sided with the prosecution, and the judge sentenced John Wayne Gacy to die. He spent the next 14 years on death row, not in quiet remorse, but as a bizarre celebrity. He gave interviews, always blaming others and claiming he was the real victim. He even started painting, selling his art, including images of his clown character, Pogo, from behind bars. For the victims' families, this was a grotesque spectacle, watching the man who destroyed their lives enjoy a strange sort of fame. Finally, after years of failed appeals, Gacy's execution date was set, May 10, 1994. For his last meal, he ordered fried chicken, shrimp, fries, and strawberries, a strangely ordinary choice, as if trying to appear normal one last time. As the midnight hour approached, Gacy was moved to the execution chamber. He was offered a chance to make a final statement. Would he apologize? Show any remorse? His reported last words were, "Kiss my ass." No apology, no regret, just defiance to the very end. The execution itself was delayed by a technical issue with the lethal injection equipment, a grim 18-minute wait. At 1:18 a.m., John Wayne Gacy was pronounced dead. In the aftermath, Gacy's case changed how police investigate missing persons, especially among vulnerable groups. It shattered the myth that monsters always look like monsters, proving that evil can hide behind a friendly face. Advances in DNA technology later brought closure to some families, identifying previously unknown victims years after their deaths. The story of John Wayne Gacy is a horrifying lesson in the darkness that can hide in plain sight, and a stark reminder to always take warning signs seriously. We learned to listen to survivors. Several young men escaped from Gacy, reporting their experiences to the police, but their reports weren't taken seriously. Today, there's a greater awareness that survivors' accounts deserve a thorough investigation, even when the accused seems respectable. We also learned about the importance of persistence. Robert Piest's mother refused to accept easy answers. She pushed investigators to focus on Gacy even when he seemed like an unlikely suspect. Her determination broke the case open and likely prevented more murders. The house on Somerdale Avenue is gone now. The land was sold, and new homes were built. Life went on in that quiet Chicago suburb. But the memory of what happened there remains a dark chapter in American criminal history. Now, you might be wondering, why did this documentary mention Texas executions in the title? Well, here's the connection. While John Wayne Gacy was executed in Illinois, Texas has become known as the state that carries out the most executions in America. By far. Since the death penalty was reinstated in the United States in 1976, Texas has executed over 580 people. That's more than any other state. The executions take place at the Huntsville Unit, a prison that houses the state's execution chamber. The process in Texas is different from what Gacy experienced. Texas uses lethal injection exclusively. The condemned prisoner is strapped to a gurney in a small room. Witnesses, including victims' families and media, watch from behind glass. The prisoner is given a chance to make a final statement. Then, a series of drugs are injected, meant to cause unconsciousness, stop breathing, and finally, stop the heart. Like with Gacy's execution, these final statements vary wildly. Some prisoners apologize. Some maintain their innocence. Some thank their families. And some, like Gacy, remain defiant to the very end. The debate over capital punishment continues to this day. Is it justice or revenge? Does it deter crime or just perpetuate violence? Does it provide closure for victim families, or does it create more trauma? These questions have no easy answers, and people of good conscience disagree. What we do know is that cases like John Wayne Gacy's force us to confront the darkest aspects of human nature. They remind us that evil is real. They challenge us to build systems that protect the vulnerable. They push us to pay attention, to take warnings seriously, to believe survivors, and to never stop asking questions. In all the attention paid to John Wayne Gacy over the years, all the books, documentaries, and even paintings sold, it's easy to forget the most important part of this story, the victims. 33 young men and boys who never came home. They never got to graduate, get married, have children, or pursue their dreams. They were stolen from their families in the most horrible way imaginable. Their names deserve to be remembered. Timothy McCoy, John Butkovich, Daryl Sampson, Randall Reffitt, Samuel Stapleton, Michael Bonin, William Carroll, James Byron Hawkinson, Rick Johnston, Kenneth Parker, Michael Marino, William Bundy, Francis Alexander, Gregory Godzik, John Szyc, John Prestige, Matthew Bowman, Robert Gilroy, John Mowry, Russell Nelson, Robert Winch, Tommy Bowling, David Talsma, William Kindred, Timothy O'Rourke, Frank Landingin, James Matsura, Robert Piest, and several others identified years later through DNA technology. Some victims remain unidentified even today. They are someone's son, someone's brother, someone's friend. Their families deserve answers. The real horror of the John Wayne Gacy case isn't just that one man could be so evil. It's that society failed these young people. We failed to protect them. We failed to notice the warning signs. We failed to investigate thoroughly enough when they disappeared. We failed to connect the pattern until 33 lives had been lost. We owe it to them to do better, to build systems that protect vulnerable young people, to take missing persons seriously, to believe survivors, to look past charming facades when something doesn't feel right, and to never stop searching for answers. The story of John Wayne Gacy is a story of evil, yes, but it's also a story about the failure of systems meant to protect us and the importance of people like Robert Piest's mother who refuse to give up, who demand answers, and who keep pushing until the truth comes out. That's the legacy we should take from this dark chapter. Not a fascination with a killer, but a determination to prevent future tragedies. The crawl space under that house is empty now. The bodies have been removed and laid to rest. The house itself has been demolished, but the lessons remain, the memories remain, and the responsibility to do better remains. Somewhere, families who lost their sons all those years ago are still living with that loss every single day. That's the real story. Not the killer's final meal or final words, but the lives that were taken and the families left behind. If you find this story important, kindly like, comment, subscribe, and turn on your notifications for more true crime and prison documentaries.